We have a very specific cultural image of the Golden Age pirate. We picture a brilliant, agile, tactical mastermind swinging from the rigging, executing flawless maritime maneuvers with a sword in his teeth. The historical reality is significantly less impressive. Many of the most notorious pirates operating during the Golden Age were highly uncoordinated, entirely unprofessional individuals who made completely preventable errors. Look past the Hollywood veneer, and you find a criminal underworld driven by mundane human flaws, petty midlife crises, toxic middle management, and catastrophic substance abuse. If the most feared criminals on the high seas lacked basic competence, how did they manage their operations, and why did they fail so spectacularly? This map of Barbados highlights the wealthy colonial origins of Stede Bonnet, a man who completely shatters the mastermind illusion. Bonnet was an educated landowner, comfortably far removed from the desperate poverty we usually associate with high seas crime. He didn't turn to piracy out of necessity or political rebellion. According to historical records, Bonnet entered the criminal underworld simply because he deeply hated his wife and wanted to leave his house. Instead of capturing a vessel by force, Bonnet took the incredibly mundane step of purchasing a ship legally. He hired 70 men on a fixed salary and named his new sloop Revenge, a petty jab directed entirely at his spouse. There was one fatal flaw in his new criminal enterprise. Bonnet possessed zero navigational knowledge. He didn't know how to sail, turning him into a completely useless puppet standing on his own deck. His sheer incompetence made him an easy target. When Bonnet crossed paths with the legendary Blackbeard, the veteran pirate immediately recognized a mark. Blackbeard smoothly hijacked the operation, took control of the Revenge, and eventually abandoned Bonnet's entire crew to run off with their accumulated wealth. Bonnet's brief, disastrous career proves that sometimes a terrifying pirate legend was actually just a wealthy civilian buying a dangerous reputation to run away from domestic life. This map of the Isles Antilles illustrates the sprawling theater of Caribbean pirate operations, a territory ruled by men like Captain Charles Vane. We tend to view captains like Vane as absolute, unchallenged dictators, commanding their ships with an iron fist. In reality, most pirate crews operated under a remarkably modern organizational structure, strict democracy. Captains were elected, and they served entirely at the pleasure of their voting crew. For Charles Vane, this democratic system triggered an immediate crisis. While out on patrol, his crew encountered a heavily armed French warship. Looking at the sheer number of enemy cannons, Vane made the rational, tactical decision to retreat. His crew rejected this basic survival strategy. Driven by an illogical desire for violence and plunder, the men actively dismissed Vane's caution and demanded an attack. When Vane refused to issue the order, the crew took immediate action. They held a quick vote, fired Vane in the spot for cowardice, elected a new captain, and exiled Vane in a tiny wooden rowboat. A heavily armed naval adversary didn't end Vane's tenure as captain. He lost his command to a toxic democratic workplace that actively penalized basic common sense and strategic logic. We also expect a pirate's final moments to be a glorious, blazing last stand. Calico Jack is often remembered in this cinematic light, though his primary tactical advantage was simply employing two incredibly fierce fighters, Bonny and Mary Read. The climax of Jack's career arrived in October 1720. A heavily armed British pirate hunter cornered his ship, setting the stage for what should have been a violent maritime clash. The actual encounter was thoroughly embarrassing. Calico Jack and the entirety of his male crew were completely incapacitated by alcohol. Facing imminent capture, they chose to sleep on the deck. While the men remained snoring, Bonny and Mary Read were forced to draw their weapons and defend the vessel entirely on their own. Their solo defense could only last so long. The authorities effortlessly overwhelmed the ship, captured the sleeping crew, and sent Calico Jack and his men to the gallows. There was no tactical brilliance or cinematic glory in Jack's demise. His historical downfall was the direct result of a lack of basic professionalism and drinking heavily on the job. When we examine the records, the defining figures of the Golden Age of Piracy start to look remarkably ordinary. Their empires collapsed due to petty marital disputes, terrible middle management, and heavy substance abuse. The Hollywood myth survives because flawless, highly choreographed villains are inherently more entertaining to watch than bumbling humans making entirely avoidable errors. While the high seas certainly held genuine physical danger, the fatal mistakes these crews made were incredibly mundane. Their failures prove that basic human error easily transcends centuries. Actual history rarely adheres to a perfectly planned cinematic script. It is almost always far more chaotic, clumsier, and hilariously human.